Li Chi listening to An Wanshan playing his reed whistle. On South Mountain, he cut bamboo to make his whistle. This music originally came from Kucha. After it came to the land of Han, its sound was unique. This Tartar from Liangzhou plays it for me. The bystanders hear it and sigh endlessly. Travellers far from home are all moved to tears. People hear it but don't appreciate what they hear. Its tone is like a howling, spinning storm. Like withered mulberry or old cypress trees sighing in a cold wind, or 9 phoenix chicks confusedly chirping, or dragons bellowing and tigers screaming at the same time. Then every sound of nature, 100 bubbling springs, all fall silent. Suddenly, it changes to the tune of Yuyang drums. Yellow clouds grow lonely, and the sun fades to dark. Then changed again, it is like willows in spring, as if every flower in the Shangling gardens bloomed at once. It's on New Year's Eve, in the high hall, bright candles burn in rows. For each cup of fine wine, there's another marvelous tune. So this is the 5th of their heptasyllabic old-style poems of Li Chi to be included in this anthology. And like the other 4, all of them, to a greater or to a lesser extent, have had the same topic, which is music. Music being played, music entertaining people in a banquet, music generating impressions, generating visions in the listening audience. Very commonly as well, it has been music produced by foreign instruments or by foreigners. Tibetan flute players, in this case Central Asian flutists. So again we have another poem of music, and again we have another reprise of many of the ideas, many of the topics, many of the images that were shown to us in the previous poems. So the topic of the poem, as I said, is pretty straightforward. It's appreciation of music, listening to music, and the effect, the images that music generates in the listener. And all of this in a context, from what is described at the end, of at least mild celebration and wine drinking and enjoyment of the arts, part of the symposiac tradition. So let's start taking a look at, different aspects of the poem. That is the main topic. Like the previous poem, to which it has, many similarities. The one about Dong Ting Lang playing the tune, the sound of the Tartar reed flute. In this poem, we also get someone who is not a Chinese playing on quite weird instrument, the reed whistle. I've checked, and this instrument, the reed whistle, was a type of flute, more commonly called, I think it was bili, is the most common name, and it was a musical instrument that, as the poem says, came from Central Asia during the Han Dynasty, so at approximately the same time as the Roman Empire. So the title is Listening to An Wanshan playing his reed whistle. The musician here is a foreigner, An Wanshan. That is also explained in the poem. He comes from the western regions, and that surname, An, is very typical of foreigners who came from Anxi, the pacified western regions of Central Asia that were part of the Tang dynasty. Just a little bit about music before we go into the poem itself. the different periods in which China was an expansive empire absorbing foreign peoples into its imperial domains were also times in which the Chinese were receptive to foreign musical airs and styles, probably partly because they conquered those peoples and brought them as slaves, artists, and musicians to the imperial court, also because the expansive and self confident attitude at the height of an empire would probably predispose the nationals to a more cosmopolitan worldview and to a more receptive attitude related to foreign culture, foreign musical instruments, and things like that. Okay, so let's start with a poem then. On South Mountain, he cut bamboo to make his whistle. This music originally came from Kucha. After it came to the land of Han, its sound was unique. This Tartar from Liangzhou plays it for me. So this is the first stanza, and the first stanza works as an introduction, as a general introduction to the whole poem and to the whole situation of a foreign musician playing a foreign instrument. The instrument is made from a piece of bamboo that was cut on a mountain. It said the music came from Kucha. Now, Kucha was one of the Chinese vassal states in Central Asia, in the area that the Chinese called the Western regions, or the pacified West, Anxi, which during the times of splendor of the Han and also of the Tang were a series of city-states in what today is Turkestan, Central Asia, that were under the hegemony and under the partial rule of a Chinese commissioner there. So Kucha was one of these city-states, and it was reputed for having very good musicians and musical instruments being created there. So the sound came to the land of Han. Han is sometimes used generically for Chinese, or not just specifically referring to the Han dynasty. It came to the land of Han, and now this Tartar from Liangzhou plays it for me. Liangzhou is the northwestern province of the Chinese Empire, just before the empire proper ends, and it's a small corridor, they're called the Gansu area corridor, that connects that northwest area with the Anxi, with the barbarian areas of the northwest. Next stanza. So in the first stanza was an introduction. The second stanza starts describing the influence, the effect that the music has on people. With the same, this is very similar to what we saw in the previous poem. The first reaction that good musical instruments and that good musical playing has on people is emotional, and it's making them cry. We have to say that this instrument that we're talking about, the bili, was associated with dark, melancholy, sad feelings, because it was supposed to produce a melancholy, sad tone. The bystanders hear it and sigh endlessly. Travellers far from home are all moved to tears. People hear it but don't appreciate what they hear. Its tone is like a howling, spinning storm. So the music is played and it makes people sigh or cry, especially those who are far from their homes and therefore would feel nostalgic at hearing a music that reminisces the home of the musical player, but also of the listener. Even if you can't understand completely the music, because it might be foreign or you might not be an expert in music, it affects you well enough. And this is very Chinese. Music affects emotions. It's a prime generator of emotions. And then we get the first of a series of descriptions of the music, probably describing as well, the different, how could we say, the different movements, the different changes that the music is going to experience. The different tempos, faster, now slower, higher pitch, lower pitch. So the tone is like a howling, spinning storm. So this is probably a metaphor of a quick tempo, very rushing, howling wind. The next stanza will completely describe also the impressions that the poet, that come to the mind of the poet while he's listening. Like withered mulberry leaves, or all old cypress trees sighing in a cold wind, or 9 phoenix chicks confusedly chirping, or dragons bellowing and tigers screaming at the same time. Then every sound of nature, 100 bubbling springs, all fall silent. So this also appeared in the other poem. You get the description of the different associations, of the pictorial or visual associations that the music stirs in the poet. And after those, there suddenly comes a moment of silence. We evoke how the people, the listeners, are so entrapped, so fascinated, so spellbound by the music that all sounds besides the music fall silent. A withered mulberry, old cypress trees sighing in the cold wind. Yeah, this is probably also, a more rustling sound, a tune that has turned dismal. The soughing, the rustling, the more shh sounds, yeah, of the wind in the leaves, of the wind in the trees. Or 9 phoenix chicks confusedly chirping. So now we get confusion, yeah, chirping, disorder, a bird-like noise, yeah, probably light music, but quite noisy music as well. Or dragons bellowing, tigers screaming at the same time. This is evidently a strong sound. It's some sort of bursting, roaring sound. Then every sound of nature, 100 bubbling springs, all fall silent. So we get silence, we get peace. Okay, the next stanza shows us a couple of other moves in the music. So if this previous stanza had some changes, some modulations, some ups and downs, changes of tempo in the music, these become clearer in the next stanza. And the next stanza also puts the focus not so much on the impressions, on the images that appear in the poet's mind, as in the reminiscing of other musical tunes, of other pieces of music that the poet already knows, other tunes. So suddenly it changes to the tune of Yuzhang drums. Yellow clouds grow lonely, and the sun fades to dark. Then, changed again, it is like willows in spring, as if every flower in the Shangling gardens bloomed at once. So 2 moves. The first one, the music changes to the tune of Yuzhang drums. Now, Yuzhang drums, I took a look at what they were. Yuzhang is an area in China, probably typical, an area that has drum instruments, but other references, the other translations of this line point to a tune that was called Fishing in the Sun, that was very solemn, but also very sorrowful. So suddenly it changes to the tune of Yuzhang drums. It adopts this solemn and sorrowful tone. Yellow clouds grow lonely, and the sun fades to dark. Yeah, so they're sad images, they're dark images, they're gloomy images, desolate, depressing, bleak images. Then changed again. It is like willows in spring, and this is clearly another tune. In fact, in the poem, it's presented between brackets, as if every flower in the Shangling gardens bloomed at once. So the music changes to a completely different tempo, a more exciting, a more lively, a more happy sort of tempo, yeah, a more lively tune. And this tune feels like all the flowers of the imperial gardens blooming at once. The Shangling gardens were traditionally the gardens of next to the imperial palace in the Han Dynasty, and I imagine they became a common phrase, a catchword for all the imperial gardens. So the music changes from that gloomy, dark, descending tone. We suddenly get an airy, sprightly, happy, explosively beautiful turn in the music, which is like a sea of flowers all blossoming at once. And finally, last couplet. The last couplet brings us to the conclusion, and we stop feeling or seeing or listening to how the music inspires images or is similar or different from other types of tunes. We get back to a very localized context in time, just as the beginning of the poem had introduced us to that very specific context, time, and people. So on New Year's Eve, in the high hall, bright candles burn in rows. For each cup of fine wine, there's another marvelous tune. So all this music seems to be being played for a celebration. So probably the New Year's Eve or the New Year feast, which is it's an important celebration in all cultures, but it also was an important event in the imperial Chinese calendar, and there were big celebrations for the new year and banqueting and gift giving in the imperial court. So we might imagine that Li Qi and this An Wanshan are in the imperial court, in a banqueting hall probably, and it's bright with candles. Yeah? So it's at night, probably a night banquet before New Year's Day. Lots of candles. The scene is a sea of light, we could say. And for each cup of fine wine, there's another marvelous tune. There is a matching, there is a pairing. Everybody is drinking alcohol and being happy and enjoying the celebration. And the wine seems to be paired with the tunes. One cup, one tune. So, quite a pleasant way of finishing the poem. The poem finishes on a quite happy note, yeah, of drinking and enjoying the arts. So, quite a nice poem. As I said, very similar to some of the other poems, which had some of the same parts as this one, if not all of them sometimes, and which also featured, especially the one just before this one, On Hearing Dongting Lam Play. That one also featured a lot of images, stirred, evoked by the music. So, yeah, quite a nice poem.